The irony of being in front of you today is when I was at Cornell, I knew nothing about entrepreneurship. When I was growing up, I knew nothing about entrepreneurship. I didn't even consider entrepreneurship a career path. I didn't consider entrepreneurship anything that would have anything to do with me. Entrepreneurship in my head was something that people were raised in families that started small businesses and they learned how to do such things, and it didn't have any applicability to my life at all. I did know when I was at Cornell that I didn't want two things. One, I didn't want a soul-sucking job. I wanted to avoid that with everything that was inside me. And I actually wanted to have an impact in my life. I wanted to feel a sense of significance in my life. And that led me to lots of places in Africa for about 7 years. I was in Nairobi, Kenya, worked with the United Nations. I was in Cape Town, South Africa, trying to help some young kids get off the street and into school. And then finally, about 4.5 years ago, I was in Monrovia, Liberia, at a hotel called Royal Hotel, attempting, of all things, to try to attract foreign direct investment to a country that has an 83% unemployment rate, where when you think of Liberia, you probably think of the movie Blood Diamond. And when I would tell my friends about what I was doing, friends that I graduated with, they actually thought that I was doing good. They thought I was throwing my energy towards something that mattered. They thought I was having real impact, real social, real environmental impact. And there's a principle in psychology, and it's a devastating one, called cognitive dissonance. And it means if you think a certain thing about yourself, a certain thing about who you are and what you're actually doing, you know the truth much more than the outside world knows the truth. And I knew, even though what I was doing sounded really good, it sounded like I gave a damn, it sounded like I was having an impact, I wasn't. Impact was small, it was inefficient, it was broken, it was slow as hell, and I was frustrated, and I didn't feel a sense of significance in my life at all. So I get back to the United States, and I start asking this question: what would it look like if I started over in my own life? I had about $20,000 or so in my bank account at the time. And what would it look like if we started over and we used business to just beat the hell out of bad problems out there? We use business, not a nonprofit, not an international institution, not a government agency like I had experience with in the last 7 years, but we use the power of capitalism to just inflict a lot of energy on something that mattered. So I started thinking about big systems that I wanted to ask this question to. I thought about education and healthcare. I thought about energy. I thought about campaign finance. And you can ask yourself about all those big systems. Imagine if you could start over in energy. Imagine if you didn't have all the preconceptions and all the habits and ways of thinking about education. What kind of system would we have? But I didn't get obsessed about those two. I got obsessed about the system of food. And the more that I dug in and I unpacked and I just ripped apart the system of food, the uglier it became and the crazier it looked and the more inefficient it looked. And the more I realized that today's food system, not just in the United States, but globally, is really screwed up. And it's screwed up in ways that disconnect us from our values, that disconnect us from things that everyday humans believe in, like compassion, like integrity, like strengthening the environment instead of degrading the environment, like strengthening societies and farmers instead of degrading them. And this is a simplified version of today's food system. I was raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and I have a lot of experience with the wrong thing. My mom, a hairdresser, my dad, as a family, just didn't have a lot of money, and I was raised pretty much on a bunch of shitty food. Vending machine cinnamon rolls and nachos and cheese at 7-Eleven and Burger King chicken sandwiches. And when I asked my mom, what's going on, Mom? Like, can we eat a little bit better? She would say one of two things. Either it's too expensive or, that stuff didn't even taste good, you're not going to eat it. And you have a system problem, not a people problem. You have a system of food today globally that makes it wickedly easy for really good people, not people who make over $100,000 a year, even though they're really good people, but regular people in this country, in this world, to eat like shit, to eat in a way that is totally disconnecting themselves from the values that we all agree on. It's too easy to do the wrong thing. But the more I looked into it, the more the right thing probably pissed me off more than the one on the left. Because the answer to the system is to say, That it's not a system problem, it's a people problem. We need to create a world of conscious consumers, and if we can make the right thing and sell it at lots of stores and jack up the price by 30, 60% and encourage people to eat in a conscious way, well, maybe we can change the system. And that's how I saw entrepreneurs addressing the food system, and it really bothered me. Because there was no way in hell my mom or my dad or my friends in Birmingham or kids who I went to college with who didn't have a lot of money were going to spend more to eat in a way that is strengthening to the climate or to eat in a way that is better for animals. Not because they're bad people, because they're too busy. They don't have enough money. It's too hard to do the right thing. So everything I do today, everything that Hampton Creek, the company I founded almost 4 years ago, is based on is this philosophy. And it's a philosophy that says the only way the good thing wins is when you make it so much better than the not so good thing, even people who don't give a damn about their body and the environment still would choose it. Because the only way the good thing wins is when the good thing tastes so much better and is more affordable. The only way the good thing wins is when you view the solution to the good thing as a system problem, not a people problem. And if you could create a food system out there where the healthiest food, where the food that strengthened the environment, where the food that connected us with things that we all share, if that food tasted better, if that food was sexier, if that food was more accessible, if that food was just better in every possible way, everyone would choose it, including buyers at Walmart and Costco and the biggest food service company in the world, including random restaurants, including you when you're thinking about what to eat for breakfast. And then the company just took off. And we were lucky enough to have been named the second most innovative company in Fast Company. Inc. magazine called us one of the fastest growing food companies on the planet. I've had this surreal experience, including the last 2 days that I just spent with the White House and senators. Bill Gates called us one of 3 companies shaping the future of food. The second wealthiest person in Asia got in touch with us and said he wants to invest capital in the company. And it has just been the most incredible ride and a real exploration, I think, of the power of asking the question, what would it look like if we started over? Now, the dream, the philosophy of making the good thing easier doesn't just come by saying it, it comes by actually doing something about it. In the same way that if you want to create a zero-emission vehicle, you can't do it via an internal combustion engine. You have to adopt a different approach. You've got to use lithium-ion batteries. You've got to have different versions of a powertrain. You've got to have different tools and a different way of thinking in order to get to where you're trying to go. Our different approach is based upon an insight. There are 400,000 species of plants in this world. 400,000 of them. And for some reason, 92% of them haven't really been explored for how they can make your food better. We got really addicted to soy. We got really addicted to corn. It's like we forgot there are farmers out there growing sorghum, a grain, and yellow peas, and navy beans, and all this stuff out there that sometimes we don't use at all, sometimes we use as animal feed, sometimes we just use in tiny little ways in small communities, instead of connecting these farmers and what they're growing to something larger. Now, what we do at Hampton Creek with a team of computational biologists and biochemists and people who formerly led projects like the human genome is we screen through these 400,000 species of plants. We dig deep into their molecular properties like this one of the Canadian yellow pea. And we're able to connect molecular properties within these individual plant species to functionalities that we really desire to build better food products. An example is one of the first products that we created called Just Mayo, which incidentally was the cause of a lawsuit from the third largest consumer packaged good company in the world, Unilever. I'll tell you more about that and how that was resolved. But food, and this isn't very romantic to say it, but whether you're having an apple, a cookie, a vegetable sandwich, or a hamburger, is made up of a discrete set of functionalities. So take a muffin, for an example. A muffin is made up of things that enable it to aerate, meaning build volume when heat is coming around it. It has a certain texture, flavor, mouthful, browning. All of these functionalities of something as simple as a muffin are driven by a set of molecular properties. Same deal with mayo, $14 billion market, by the way. It's made up of certain functionalities. like emulsification, the ability for oil and water to come together, like mouthfeel, like preservation, like stability. So we've been able to find plants that enable us to make everyday food products like mayo better. What does better mean? Less water, less land, tastier, more affordable. The execution of the point of the company. Now, it ain't just about mayo. We found plants that can do lots of different things, like when you throw it in a pan, it actually scrambles up. And when you step back for a moment and you realize the power to look at food differently, the power to look at food as a platform for change, it gets so exciting because you can imagine pasta that uses less water and that uses less land. You can imagine ice creams and dips and custards and all sorts of things. When you approach it in an entirely different way, meaning through biochemistry, through culinary, through tapping into things that the world forgot about, you can create a lot of change and not feel so bad about yourself that you're bullshitting people at the same time. Now, I'm not a scientist, and when I was trying to imagine how I do this, I started off attempting to solve the problem with a very conventional approach. I asked, what would food scientists at General Mills and Kellogg's and Kraft do? And I did that for a little bit, and we got nowhere. And we just ran up against walls and walls and walls. And it wasn't until I actually asked a biochem friend of mine, who I graduated Cornell with, what do you think about all this? How might you approach it? He didn't end up working with us or anything, but the questions that he was asking were different than the questions that food scientists were asking. He was asking about the molecular weight of the protein and solubility, terms I'd never heard before. He was asking about properties like surface protein hydrophobicity. And I didn't know the answer. I didn't know whether this varietal had surface protein hydrophobicity above this particular threshold or not. But I started to get curious, like, why don't I know the answer? And why aren't people approaching food in this way? So for 2 years, we were engaged in this research. And again, we've only been around for a little bit under 4 years. And then we decided that it's time to get into the marketplace. And we got into the marketplace with a set of products from pancakes to muffins to mayo to all sorts of different salad dressings. And the largest food companies in the world decided that they wanted to be a part of it. Even this New York Times Center that we're in today, we have an incredible partnership with Compass Group, which is the biggest food service company in the world. They serve 1 billion meals a year. We have a partnership with them that says, if we make something, it doesn't matter what it is, it could be a sauce or a dressing or a piece of bread that ends up being better from a culinary perspective and affordable, they will eliminate their current incumbent product, whether it's from the 3rd largest CPG company in the world or not, and they have, and replace it entirely with ours. So what that means is in 2,300 public schools and corporate cafes like the New York Times, in Google and HBO and NFL, at Texas A&M University, at Cornell, all these different places, the only ranch dressing and mayo and balsamic, the only muffin, pancake, all that happens to be the one that's made with a plant, whether that plant is a grain called sorghum or a yellow split pea. And we also have partnerships with the largest retailers in the world, like Walmart. And even places that you wouldn't think we would be in, like the Dollar Tree. And it's important, I think, just to pause there to make the point, why did we start this thing? This thing is not an initiative to feed wealthy people better. It's a system problem. If we can make it a little bit easier for a person, a mom, a dad, a young kid living out of a white envelope to eat a little bit better at a Dollar Tree in South Carolina, we'll do it. And we don't feel like that is degrading to our brand, like some have said. We feel like it is our brand. And following that energy and that power is us. And this makes me more proud of anything, because remember, I felt bad about the impact that I was having. This is just the impact with that one company, Compass Group, this year. The impact in terms of water, 1.2 billion gallons of water saved just because we have a slightly different approach to things. The impact in terms of grams of cholesterol or sodium ripped out of our current food system. But this is just in 1 year. So we get excited about all the change that's to come, These are a number of things that are coming out, including this plant that you throw in the pan that could scramble up. We've raised a little bit over $200 million. We're the most valuable food tech company on the planet today. And it's not just about products, right? Because you can have the best technology in the world and the best products in the world, and people might not give a damn. You've got to connect with people on an emotional level. You've got to share the story of who you are to people that are made up of multiple constituent groups. And we decided to do something a little bit odd. We decided to write a series of letters in the New York Times. And the first letter we put in the New York Times was to food leaders. It's a list of all the companies that have worked with us. The largest food service company in the world, the second largest retailer in the US, the largest natural grocery retailer in the world, and literally just thank them for getting aboard this bus. Thank them for believing in a philosophy. Thank them for realizing it's not a people problem, it's a system problem. And we got an incredible response from it. This is a young woman named Annie who said, the first thing I read this morning was a story on the front page of the New York Times about how Tic Tac is struggling to market to millennials, and they have these bizarre dynamic mints and such, and they spent 18 months doing all this research on millennials. And she said, I turned to page 7, she saw that ad, never heard of Hampton Creek. I just want you to know that I think you're doing it right. Annie. So then we liked the energy of that, and we decided let's do something a little bit, I don't know, even more bizarre. Let's write to 23-year-olds. Let's imagine that I was writing to myself as a confused 23-year-old in Cascadilla Hall who wanted to avoid a soul-sucking job with all of his might, who didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. Like, what the hell would I say to myself? And we challenged 23-year-olds to solve the world's biggest needs instead of pursuing bullshit. We challenged 23-year-olds to start companies that compete directly with us. We said to 23-year-olds that selflessness in a lot of ways in this world can be profitable. And we got this incredible response, including from Melissa. She ain't a 23-year-old, but she's a mom of 2 teenage boys. And like a lot of other moms who have sons that feel like they're kind of struggling and not know what the hell they're doing, they wrote to us and thanked us, and we've actually hired quite a few young people from that ad too. Then we decided, I don't know, this is kind of working, let's write to grandmas. What do you say to a great grandma? And I think I have the record, at least in the last 3 months, of taking more direct phone calls from great grandmas than anyone else in the country. Because what you don't see on these ads below when I say thank you, Josh, and I leave my phone number. Again, this is in the Sunday edition of the New York Times, either on page 5 or page 7. We asked great grandmas a question, what would it look like if we started over in food, great grandmas? And they gave us a pretty awesome answer, I said. So, you know, it's funny, like we're doing all this high-tech stuff and all this screening and computational biology we think we're so smart doing. And great grandma said, well, what would it look like if we start over in food would probably mean that we just teach people how to cook. That's it. And it's pretty beautiful wisdom. And I think, and we're thinking about actually ways to integrate that more into how we think and how we do things as a company. This is one of our favorite great grandmas, Myra. So as we're doing this, I'm realizing there's kind of a conversation starting. Journalists are getting in contact with me. And I'm realizing more and more that food has this potential to galvanize people. It's not just about food. It's not about organic or not, or GMO or not. That the food system can be a platform for change for lots of different things. It can be a way to connect different people together. It's a conversation about identity. It can be a way to deal with important issues like type 2 diabetes and climate. It can be a conservative thing and a democratic thing. So we decided, I don't know, what the hell? Let's write to the presidential candidates. Because I always watch the debates, and I never hear them mention a damn thing about food, even though it's a huge opportunity for them to do something in a very nonpartisan way. And we end up having 4 different candidates and their team reach out to us. We've since engaged pretty aggressively in DC. I just mentioned I had the great opportunity to be at the White House 48 hours ago and share our story and share our story with 2 US senators yesterday. And it's exciting for us to imagine that through entrepreneurship and policy, food can be more than about food, but a mechanism to really have a lot of impact. I mentioned Liberia, and I mentioned this question, what would it look like if we started over, how freaking frustrated I was when I was there because I wasn't making change. We decided just recently actually to go back there. We decided to go back and to work with some young girls in a slum in Liberia called West Point. There are young girls there that are a part of an organization called More Than Me that have suffered from crazy, unfortunate, awful sexual violence, who haven't been to school ever in their lives. But what's amazing about these young girls is they are incredible entrepreneurs because life has forced them to be. Life has forced them to be creative. Life has forced them to understand how to get out of situations that other people can't even imagine. Life has forced them to use their ingenuity in powerful ways to try to just save their own lives. And we decided to start over with them. And my company, Hampton Creek, is building an entrepreneurship center right in that slum in West Point to help them start over, to help light the fire of entrepreneurship that's already lit up in them, to also do some really positive things for the world. I'll end it with this. The biggest thing that I've learned is that if we can just figure out a way as entrepreneurs to make it a little bit easy, just a little bit easier, for good people to do the right thing, they will do it. And they'll do it with force. They'll do it without a lot of resistance. And I think there's so many needs in this world for entrepreneurs to attack that it would be a shame, given all of them, for you not to throw your life, for you not to ask that question about starting over and go attack them. Thanks, guys.